Hi there everyone, it's Russell. Welcome to the Reading Fabricator, and today I'm going to do a double feature review of two Neil Gaiman books, American Gods and Anansi Boys. Although technically it is a sequel of sorts, Anansi Boys is only a sequel in the fact that it contains the same character from American Gods. Other than that, it's not entirely related at all. There's just no relation. Just got one character from both books in it. And it was a very mixed feeling this week of reading. I found some highs and some lows in getting through these two books. I started with Anansi Boys because I hadn't read it first, and then going back to American Gods. And here's the one thing I can say about American Gods: this thick beast. I think it's Neil Gaiman's longest book. I actually liked it this time around, so that's good news. I was pleasantly surprised. At the time, I just couldn't get into his writing style. I just didn't like his plots or anything like that. But I admitted that he had a fantastic creative imagination. Neil Gaiman has an imagination unlike anyone else out there. His ability to just conjure stories is almost unparalleled. I mean, he is to fantasy what I guess Stephen King is to horror. From the first page of American Gods, I was hooked. I was hooked, at least for a little while. I found the first 200 pages of American Gods to be my favorite part of the whole book. And then progressively, the amount of pages I would read in a sitting just got smaller and smaller. I mean, I read the first 200 pages in one day. Then it progressed to about 150. Then it dropped down to 100. Then it dropped down to 50, and eventually, so on and so forth. And I just found myself becoming exhausted with the book. That's not to say it's bad. I still actually quite enjoy this, and I do recommend it. The tale of Shadow Moon, who's just served 3 years in prison. He's about to be released to go home to his wife Laura, but then tragedy strikes. Laura dies in a car accident, and so he gets released early. And while on a plane that's having to land somewhere else for him to catch another plane, he comes across this man by the name of Mr. Wednesday, who offers him a job to basically drive him around to all sorts of appointments, to be his assistant almost. And from there, you get a sense of where this is going, in that you do find out quite quickly that there are gods among him in this world, and there are a lot of gods to name in this book. And I'd honestly say that the best parts of this novel, aside from the first 200 pages, is the coming to America sections. There are some wonderful, wonderful moments littered throughout the book in this novel that are just absolutely breathtaking in my mind. Including the tale of the djinn, the taxi driver, and the salesman, and what happens with them. I thought that was one of the absolute highlights for me. In fact, it is probably the highlight of all the Coming to America stories. But all my favorite parts in the book are actually within those first 200 pages. It would have to be Mad Sweeney, who is barely in this book at all, unfortunately. I was really excited to see his progression in the story and to find out that his main contribution is in that main segment that takes place in that crocodile bar, which is a brilliant set piece. He ends up getting into a fight with Shadow, and it's really well detailed, and obviously it doesn't end well, but from there it just carries on, and there's this absolute hint, this essence of Americana that's peppered throughout the book, where yes, it is a fantasy book by a sense, but it's also, you sort of get a visual map of America that they're traveling through, or going on all these roads, talking about the landscapes and all that sort of thing. And it just made me feel like I was in the car with them, in the back seat, listening to these conversations, watching the horizon, and watching all the different things that are described while they're driving past. The other favorite moment for me is the bank robbery scene, which is it's simultaneously hilarious and quite ingenious. I think it takes place in Chicago. I'm not quite sure, but the way that's thought out is quite beautiful indeed. I really enjoyed those segments, that one there, and with Mad Sweeney in particular. So I was very disappointed to see that Mad Sweeney is one of the gods that doesn't get mentioned as the book progresses, unfortunately. He does come to a conclusion, the character himself, but I'm not going to spoil how. Unless you've read the book, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But after his wife dies, revelations come to pass, and he finds out a few things about his wife. And when he goes to the funeral, he gets into a bit of a confrontation of sorts with his wife's best friend. And a coin that he gets from Mad Sweeney, he tosses into the grave, and it resurrects her in a way. She's almost like this presence. She's not alive, but she's also not quite dead, and who ends up following her around throughout the story and going to various places of her own accord. And from there, the story just keeps on going and going, where Shadow and Wednesday will go to various places and try to get gods to join them in their cause. Because the main plot of this book is there's going to be a war coming. A storm is coming between the new gods and the old gods. and he's trying to rally all the old gods to take on the new gods. And we're talking about old gods from Egyptian mythology and all that sort of thing, and versing new gods such as like the god of media, think that sort of thing. And there's a really bizarre sequence where Shadow goes back to a hotel room and sees the god of media showing up in a I Love Lucy episode, and a very bizarre conversation comes out of that where she's talking directly to him through the screen. I quite like that imagination as well. So from a creative standpoint, American Gods is a masterpiece, but I didn't love it. There's still something holding me back. I'm not quite sure what. But I'm not going to go on a dour note because, as I said before, I didn't like it the first time I read it, but I do love it a hell of a lot more now. So this was an absolute pleasant surprise. And one of my favourite sections actually is when he gets into this conversation with a person by the name of Sam, who I think Sam is probably the most interesting non-god in this book. Yes, that includes Shadow. I don't think Shadow has much of a personality, but I think he's more of a vessel for you to put yourself into his shoes. That's how he's pretty much described it in the book. But Sam is her own character, and she has a few small moments, and she's basically a supporting character for him. And when he tries to explain to her what is happening, she goes on this massive monologue of sorts, saying about what she believes in, and I'm going to read to you now. I think it's the highlight of the book for me. It's the best part. Okay, so this is about 2/3 of the way through the book. It takes place in a place called Lakeside, which is where Shadow is basically hiding or keeping a low profile while Wednesday goes and conducts all these meetings. And it starts like this: I can't believe things that are true, and I can believe things that aren't true, and I can believe things where nobody knows if they're true or not. I can believe in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and Marilyn Monroe and the Beatles and Elvis and Mr. Ed. Listen, I believe that people are perfectible, that knowledge is infinite, that the world is run by secret banking cartels and is visited by aliens on a regular basis. Nice ones that look like wrinkly lemurs and bad ones who mutilate cattle and want our water and our women. I believe that the future sucks, and I believe that the future rocks, and I believe that one day White Buffalo Woman is going to come back and kick everyone's ass. I believe that all men are just overgrown boys with deep problems communicating, and that the decline in good sex in America is coincident with the decline in drive-in movie theaters from state to state. I believe that all politicians are unprincipled crooks, and I still believe that they are better than the alternative. I believe that California is going to sink into the sea when the big one comes, while Florida is going to dissolve into madness and alligators and toxic waste. I believe that antibacterial soap is destroying our resistance to dirt and disease, so that one day we'd all be wiped out by the common cold like the Martians in War of the Worlds. I believe that the greatest poets of the last century were Edith Sitwell and Don Marquis, that jade is dried dragon sperm, and that thousands of years ago, in a former life, I was a one-armed Siberian shaman. I believe that mankind's destiny lies in the stars. I believe that candy really did taste better when I was a kid, that it's aerodynamically impossible for a bumblebee to fly, that light is a wave and a particle, and that there's a cat in a box somewhere who's alive and dead at the same time, although if they don't ever open the box to feed it, it'll eventually just be two different kinds of dead, and that there are stars in the universe billions of years older than the universe itself. I believe in a personal God who cares about me and worries and oversees everything I do. I believe in an impersonal God who set the universe in motion and went off to hang with her girlfriends and doesn't even know that I'm alive. I believe in an empty and godless universe and causal chaos. I am background noise and sheer blind luck. I believe that anyone who says that sex is overrated just hasn't done it properly. I believe that anyone who claims to know what's going on will lie about the little things too. I believe in absolute honesty and sensible social lies. I believe in a woman's right to choose, a baby's right to live, that while all human life is sacred, there's nothing wrong with the death penalty if you can trust the legal system implicitly, and that no one but a moron would ever trust the legal system. I believe that life is a game, life is a cruel joke, and that life is what happens when you're alive, and that you might as well lie back and enjoy it. She stopped, out of breath. That to me is the pinnacle for me. That seems to be all of Neil Gaiman's ideas compressed into one monologue section, and it's the longest speech given in the entire book. As you can see, it's quite a long speech, but I think it brings together all these points, all these thematic points that Neil Gaiman's trying to get at with American Gods, and encompasses it in one moment for you. So that really struck a chord with me. That is the best part of the book. As for the whole Lakeside segment, I mean, there's a serial killer subplot into that as well, although unfortunately I wasn't as enamored with it as most people are. I sort of guessed the killer right away based on the characters that are involved in Lakeside, but there are some other wonderful non-god characters that take place in that. area as well. They're fine enough as it is, but you read American Gods for the Gods. You want to see how they're depicted, and most of them are, for the most part, are depicted in quite a casual but also funny and sometimes even terrifying way. Another great moment is when he goes to Cairo and sees Mr. Ibis and Jackal, who run a funeral home, and that's just such a brilliant piece of creation right there. They were among my two favorites. Another one is Chernobyl, who makes a deal with him, plays a game of checkers with him, and he wins the first game and claims that when all this is over, he will bash in Shadow's head with his sledgehammer. So that's riding on Shadow's head, riding on Shadow's mind throughout the entire book as well, is whether or not he will go through with it and have his head caved in. But on a whole, this to me was a pleasant and fun read. There's nothing difficult about it. It's not a difficult book. By no means the distraction. By no means of the imagination is this a difficult book. It's just a casual read. You can almost like read this at the beach if you wanted to. I read this outside sipping coffee, and you just get lost in the creation of it all. So from a creative standpoint, it's 5 stars, but there's just something about it that was holding me back, unfortunately. So I do recommend American Gods. But as for the second book, Anansi Boys, this one's a little bit short. It's about 450 pages, and I felt every moment of it. This one was a prolonged error for me. Unfortunately, I did not like Anansi Boys. I really did not like it. And I know there's going to be a problem about it when it took 100 pages for me to actually get into the story of it all. I mean, the story of Fat Charlie Nancy and his twin brother Spider, who come from Mr. Nancy, who shows up in this book as well. And Mr. Nancy being the West African trickster god, who makes quite a memorable brief appearance in this book. He shows up when Charlie's mother is dying in the hospital, and he almost shows up with like a jazz band playing this music. And he somehow resurrects Charlie's mother from death, being almost dead, and she lives on a little bit longer. And Charlie can't seem to figure out why. And Charlie's a very normal human being. Basically, he just lives a very tame life. He works at a talent agency as sort of in accounts or something along those lines. And then all these plot lines seems to spiral out of that as well. After Mr. Nancy dies, which isn't a spoiler, it takes place in like the first 10 pages. He dies at a karaoke session where he's singing to a bunch of young women in the front row, and he ends up having like a heart attack and falls off the stage onto a woman's big breasts, which is a funny moment in of itself. After that happens, he leaves at the talent agency, has to go back to Florida for the funeral, and there all these problems arise. And then all these subplots start showing up, and it starts spiraling out like a spider's web, basically. And there were parts that I did like, but it took 100 pages for me to get into this book. And for some reason, just like with American Gods, with the Coming to America sections, there are little segments in the first half of Anansi Boys which details stories about the god Anansi as it is. And they were quite wonderful as well. They were quite interesting and very well descriptive and very well written. And Neil Gaiman seems to have a way with mythology. He can write mythology in such an entertaining way and a very readable way, an engaging way. That makes me want to read his Norse mythology book. I actually think I'll really enjoy that based on how he's written mythology in these 2 books that I've got right here. But then, after Charlie comes back from the funeral, and after he's visited some old friends of his father's in Florida who claim that that if he wants to see this so-called twin brother, all he has to do is talk to a spider. So he does that, and he catches a spider that freaked out his girlfriend Rosie at the time, or his fiancée Rosie, takes the spider outside and then whispers to it to tell the brother to come meet him. And so we meet Spider, who's the very opposite of him. Even though he's a twin brother, he's sort of dressed nicer, he has a much more punk attitude, he's much more confident, a more confident human person. And that is when the book sort of became interesting to me. There's a subplot involving the talent agency that he works at, and the main character by the name of Graham Coates, who I guess could be the villain of the story, who embezzles money from celebrities and tries to frame Charlie for it. Then there's this section that I think might be the best part of the book, where Charlie goes back to Florida and sees these four old women, and they perform a seance that takes him to this place called the beginning of the world. And it's described in such an elegant and illusory way, where there's multiple caves and cliffs and a horizon and a sun that just won't set or won't rise. It's just sort of in that in-between state with colors in the sky and that sort of thing. And he's going between each cave, looking inside and seeing all these different sort of hybrid animal gods and that sort of thing, which is so elegantly written. I thought that was quite a wonderful section. And when he finally gets to the cave, he talks to this bird woman. What leads from there is one of the more entertaining sections in the book, where him and Spider are basically almost teleporting, kind of like that movie Jumper, where it's teleporting from different location. Him and Spider are teleporting to like Italy, to I think the Sahara Desert, to Antarctica, trying to outrun all these birds that are coming after him, based on a deal that Charlie made with the bird woman to get rid of Spider. Now, I'm not going to spoil any more of the book. That's about half the book right there told to you, but as a plot, I just did not fall for it. This book is 450 pages, but it feels stretched out to me. It really, really does. American Gods is, it takes twice as long to read, but at least in some way or form, I was engaged at least enough to be able to put up with it. And with all the new characters that kept coming in and out of the story, you sort of, your interest stays with it. Anansi Gods is the same 7 or 8 characters just coming back over and over again, and I didn't find any of them to be interesting at all. I mean, the most interesting character in the book is Mr. Nancy, and he's barely in this at all, which is unfortunate. This was my first time reading Anansi Boys, and I know a lot of people will disagree with me. I know all the Gaimanites out there will say that I'm wrong in every aspect, but I'm very curious to your responses. Are there any people out there who have read American Gods and Anansi Boys and proclaim that American Gods is a much better story, or share the same criticisms I have with Anansi Boys? I did not like the plot. I thought it was also a bit slapstick stupid at times. And yeah, unfortunately, it wasn't a good way to end things, a good way to begin my reading year. But I just had to read it. I had to read both these Neil Gaiman books just to bring myself back into more of a casual reading situation, especially coming off the previous books I read, which was Oppenheimer and the Cormac McCarthy novels. So these two are very different from that. But as I said before, I will stand by American Gods. I do recommend American Gods. I was pleasantly surprised that I enjoyed this as much as I did this time around. So yeah, I'm quite happy with where I ended things. So American Gods is a yes for me, and Anansi Boys is unfortunately a no for me. But I don't really have that much more to say, which is why I decided to do like a double review of his work. As a writer, Neil Gaiman is erudite. He's able to conjure up just a universe of ideas. And as I said before, from a creative standpoint, he is unparalleled. It's just that sometimes his plots just do not click with me in such a way, or some of his characters just do not work for me. In particular, the non-gods. His human characters just don't seem to have that much of a personality for me to really engage with. But that's just my opinion, right? So if you agree or disagree, let me know below. Thank you for watching, and yeah, catch you in the next one. Bye.